This guy can do the work of literally 10 other cutters. And I said, look, first, if you would pay him twice what he could make anywhere else, there's no way he's going to leave. And then you're getting 10 times the work. So your labor cost per dollar of revenue is less. And then all you need to do is go find a few more like him. And therefore, you've got a lot less people, which reduces the chaos. You can pay them twice as much. So now you've got golden handcuffs on them.
Herzlich willkommen bei Phasensprung, dem Podcast von Konstantin Schimmert und Frank Steffen. So, hello, this is Verne Harnish as my guest today in my podcast. And Verne, I appreciate a lot that you're here with me today. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, Konstantin, I appreciate that you're one of our Scaling Up coaching partners. And it was so much fun to hang out with you in Dublin a couple of months ago.
Yeah, it was big fun in Dublin, in Ireland at the European Coaches Gathering. Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah, and it's a great honor to have you because Verne, you are a legend, and you are a hero of me, and so this is. I tell a little bit your story. You are the founder of the Entrepreneur Organization. This is, I would guess, the largest entrepreneur network in the world currently, with 15,000 members and in more than 60 countries. So that's really something. You are the author of some of the most influential business books, as, for example, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, for sure, Scaling Up. And your newest book is Scaling Up Compensation. And we will talk about it a little bit later. It's very interesting. And for sure, you are the founder of Scaling Up. It's a coaches organization. And with Scaling Up, the framework, more than 70,000 companies have scaled their businesses very successfully in 6 continents. So that's really something, Verne. And let's start with my first question. Let's start with Scaling Up. Maybe tell us, why did you decide to found this organization, and what was the initial idea behind that?
Yeah, so coming out of launching what is today called the Entrepreneurs Organization. Back then, Konstantin, we were young, so it was YEO. We were all under 30, and then we turned 35, and it changed. I then thought it was important to launch an executive program like YPO had at Harvard. So in 91, we launched a program in partnership with MIT and Inc. magazine. And we moved about 1,000 CEOs, entrepreneurs through that program. And here was the thing that I saw would happen. We get them all hyped up, and they'd run back and they would share these ideas with the rest of their executive team. Their executive team is like, what were you guys smoking? Up there at MIT, they're like, give this 2 weeks, this too shall pass. And they'd come back, the CEOs the next year would come back frustrated that they couldn't really get any momentum with these important ideas. And so having done that for about 7 years, I said, and the birth of my son in 97, I said, it's 96, it was time for me to launch a company that would not just support the CEO, the entrepreneur, but would support the entire executive team and the company. Okay. And so that was really the genesis for Scaling Up. And this is our,
so
25th anniversary.
Okay, really? Wow. 25th anniversary. Okay. So 70,000 companies in 25 years. That's a lot.
It is.
Wow.
Yeah, we just crossed over 80,000. So we've added a few over the last couple of years.
Accelerating. Yes. Fantastic. So this means you had the idea to move beyond the individuum and go into teams, into organizations. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations that are into kind of personal development, and we think that's critical. It's one of the reasons we've partnered with Pat Lencioni and many other organizations, Rand Stegan, and those that really work on working with the individual executive on, maybe some quirks they've got and some weaknesses in their leadership style. We're really there to bring kind of the systems and the processes that help the whole team kind of deal with the chaos that comes with trying to scale.
Okay, there is a nice question. I learned from your bio that you are also a card-carrying magician. That's an interesting fact. And
Yeah.
my question here is, how much real magic do magicians use?
You know what? It's like everything else. It's process and it's practice and it's persistence. And if you've
Yeah.
got good equipment and a lot of perseverance, then you can really pull off some amazing things. And that's what they
Hmm.
always say: overnight successes take a hell of a long time, as Steve Jobs said. And
Hmm.
what I find is interesting is it took really 25 years, Constantine, for Apple to really hit its inflection point. It was
Yeah.
only when Steve Jobs finally came back after being in the wilderness for 10 years. Starbucks only had
Mm.
100 stores on their 20th anniversary and just started to go
Yeah.
international. And it was at their 25th anniversary again that they hit their inflection point. Now, we call
Mm.
unicorns that because they can do it in about half the time. But Airbnb
Hmm.
still messed around for like 5 years before they had any revenue inside the organization. So these overnight
Mm.
successes
Mm.
really do take a lot of time.
Yeah, and you answered already almost my next question would be how much magic is behind the success of an exceptional successful business.
Well, I just have revised Scaling Up after it's been out in the market for 8 years. We've sold about 500,000 copies. Looking forward to the next 500,000. And one of the big changes that we made is we had used what I consider now kind of an outdated analogy, and that is of climbing a mountain. We're going to
Yeah.
plant this flag, our big, hairy, audacious goal on this peak. We're going to decide we're going to conquer Everest, and we're going to kind of fight our way up the mountain, dealing with all of the challenges come with that. Yeah, it's crazy. Nature heads the other way. Every
Mm.
river and civilization has
Oh yeah,
headed down the
flows.
mountain,
Mm.
has chosen to
Mm.
take what nature understands as the path of least resistance. And
Mhm.
so I
Mm.
think, one of the pieces of interesting research that IDEO did is, they'd launched about 100 companies, funded 100 more. They wanted to understand, and they use the same framework we do: people, strategy, execution, and cash. Which one of
Yeah.
those four was most critical to those ventures that succeeded and those ventures that failed? And I love when the research is different than what everyone went in expecting. First, they found all four mattered equally. There isn't one:
Yeah.
people, strategy, execution, or cash, that matters more than the others. It's like a four-legged table. But number two, they found a fifth that matters more. And I end up actually go back in and editing my book a few years ago to add this, and that is market timing. At the end of the
Okay.
day, the market makes you look smart or the market makes you look stupid.
Hmm.
And that's
Mm.
really the magic, is being able to
Yeah.
find the right wave. And Elon Musk has done that, whether it's space
Yeah.
travel, solar,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
electric cars,
Yeah.
all of the ventures that he in are catching
Yeah.
massive waves that we're experiencing here this century. And so the
Mm. Mm.
challenge is you can be too early, and therefore you got to hang on until your bell bottom jeans are back in fashion. Or
Mm.
if you're late, you need to hop on another wave.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you. Another question, Vern. The world is in a lot of change at the moment. There is a hot war in Europe. There are business wars with China. There are pandemics, inflation, bear markets, supply chain problems. And if I talk to other consulting companies, there is a concern about cost cutting at their clients and probably losses of contracts and things like that. We at Scaling Up experience the opposite. We see entrepreneurs and CEOs saying, right now we need the support of Scaling Up. Can you explain our listeners why that is?
Well, first of all of that chaos I call barriers to entry. They have a
Mm.
tendency to kind of clean out the weak. And as we know, it's the not the fittest that survive, but it's the most adaptable, the most that are able to really pivot and move quickly. And that's what we designed our tools to do. We call not the lean startup, which Eric Ries uses, but the
Yeah.
agile scale up. And our tools allow the organization to remain agile and be able to follow very quickly the contours of these movements and markets to take advantage of. And so we've always encouraged, as we did at the beginning of the pandemic, what Margaret Heffernan, the great serial, tech entrepreneur, suggested, and that is, this is the time to be ambitious. And look, I think one of the best examples, indicators, is what Warren Buffett did. Warren sat on $51 billion in cash as we were going through the pandemic and the craziness and seeing the market skyrocket. And then in March, he went all in. He was contrary to, so when everybody else was getting scared and pulling out, he jumped in.
He went in.
And so I think it's critical too that, our tools give companies the confidence that they can navigate these rapids, these chaotic waters. And as a result, it gives them a huge advantage to really jump on market share right now in these chaotic times. And by the way, they're suggesting the entire 20s are going to be chaotic. And so, and as you know, at the heart of our work is the daily huddle. And we can come back and talk about that. But if you want to move faster, you need to pulse faster. And that's what we're able to help our clients do.
Okay, very good. And if we talk about the clients, if I talk, let's say 80% of the CEOs I'm talking with, they tell me that getting and holding good talents is one of their maybe top 3 constraints for the growth of their business. And Verne, you published last year in the middle of the COVID crisis, your latest book, Scaling Up Compensation. I would say the key message, as I read it, of the book is you should have a much more strategic approach to HR and compensation, right? And so maybe what is your answer to these CEOs who have these bottlenecks with
Well, first of all, there's 7.9 billion people on the planet. And generally, you're just trying to find the 50 or the 500 that you need anywhere in the world. And what's nice about the pandemic is it really opened up our eyes to remote workers. The fact that we can really source talent anywhere on the planet. I've got an amazing executive assistant, EA, Jean, out of the Philippines. Who's able to be there to support me and is unbelievably talented. And I just love having her on our team on the other side of the planet. I think number 2, finding and retaining A-player talent has always been difficult. A-player talent is in high demand by all kinds of companies. And that's why you want to try to poach somebody who's already working than somebody who is looking for a job. So what does that mean? And if I were to boil down one of the key points of scaling up compensation is you've got to make this decision. Forget about what it is that you pay people. And I think we get all caught up on what is the salary that should come with a particular position. And we get all of these surveys and all that. Throw all that out the window. What you're trying to do is have a whole lot less better paid smart people than a whole lot more less paid, I'm not going to say dumb people, but less productive people. And one of the things the research is clear on is that one great employee can replace 3 good. And we see it in every position, whether it's the CEO down to, I'm just actually rewriting Scaling Up Compensation right now. I'm going to the audio studio next week to do the audio book. But John Summers at Allied Printing, he's not Facebook, he's not Google, he's doing commercial printing. I said, John, I want you to go out into your printing organization and I want you to find employees that are 3 or 4 times more productive than everybody else. And Konstantin, he comes back and he said, you're right. We've got a guy we call the position a cutter. Once the paper's printed, then somebody has to cut it down to size so then we can bind it and put it out there.
So really easy job, simple job.
But this guy can do the work of literally 10 other cutters. Okay. And I said, look, first, if you would pay him twice what he could make anywhere else, there's no way he's going to leave. And then you're getting 10 times the work So your labor cost per dollar of revenue is less. And then all you need to do is go find a few more like him. And therefore, you've got a lot less people, which reduces the chaos. You can pay them twice as much. So now you've got golden handcuffs on them. Yet,
Yeah.
the number that matters most is your labor cost per gross margin dollar. And as long as that's heading down, then you're going to be in a great competitive situation. And so that's really one of the key messages in scaling up compensation.
Yeah. Yeah. Verne, you lived for quite a while also in Europe,
Yes.
right? And in Spain, I think, yeah.
Yeah, in Barcelona for
And
8 years. My 2 oldest sons are still over there.
okay, so they speak even as good Spanish as English,
And
I guess, then,
Catalan.
right?
Remember,
And Catalan.
the
All right. Yeah.
Catalonians don't even like Spain, but that's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I said the wrong thing, I guess, Okay, and now you have both experiences. You made business in Europe, you made business in the United States. What would you say is the biggest difference between European and US businesses?
Well, first, when it comes to the HR people side, the laws are so much more strict in Europe than they are in the United States when it comes to just being able to let people go and all of the other things that your listeners are familiar with. That's why the key company that we anchored scaling up compensation with was Telemedicine Clinic out of Barcelona. 450 employees, radiologists, working out of Bondi Beach in Sydney, doing nighttime readings for hospitals throughout Europe. And so the fact that we were able to kind of birth these ideas around innovative ways to structure compensation with a European company, we think made it much more easier for companies in the rest of the world to be able to adopt these ideas. So first is, again, all your listeners in Europe know, the HR policies are much tougher than they are in the United States. And so you've got to be much more careful who you hire and be much more thoughtful in how you onboard them in the situation. Number two, I really thought, Konstantin, I could come in and find a European leader to run everything that we do. And then I realized that there is no Europe, that the Dutch are so different than the Belgians, than the Germans, than the French. The French don't even like the Germans or the Spanish. And so we ended up having to find partners, as you know, to lead in every one of those countries in the native language and make sure that the book, even though everybody in Europe speaks English, that the book is in the native language along with the tools, because culture matters. One quick story. Our very first event we held in the Netherlands, and I thought, why don't we host it in Rotterdam instead of Amsterdam, so we'd be that much closer to the Belgians? And all we got was like, the Belgians are like, we don't even like the Dutch. We don't even want to go up to Rotterdam, to participate. And that's when I realized I had to have country leaders separate from this thing they call Europe. So those were the two things. The third, now why I love Europe, everybody there is just so much more relaxed, so much more mature. Okay. You guys have thousands of years of maturity. We only have hundreds of years. We're still like teenagers messing around inside our country and so uptight about politics and everything else. In Europe, you can talk about those things and still then go out for a nice glass of Ribeiro del Duero afterward and be friends. In the US, man, you can make enemies quick.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about some upsides and some downsides. I would say the scattered kind of markets that you have the different languages, different cultures and so on. This can be also a problem for companies, international companies. And, I'm thinking about, in terms of innovation, United States is far ahead. China is far ahead. From Europe, there's no really big thing coming up. No really, Google or Facebook or things like that. Nothing like that. So do you have any idea or any advice for us poor European leaders?
Yeah. Well, by the way, you have Spotify and Ericsson just bought
Yeah.
Vonage about a month
Okay.
ago. We're going to be doing some stuff with them and the like. So, and your European auto manufacturers are just leaders, in the world.
Still. Yeah.
BMW, Mercedes,
Mm.
all of those are still just unbelievable brands. But I think if there's something that holds Europe back, it is people's view of failure. The one thing that we really have an advantage of in the United States is you can fail badly and quickly get up and go again. It's not a permanent mark. And in some sense, we often suggest you'd never want to invest in someone who hasn't failed, because it's through failure that you really learn a lot of the important lessons that you need for the next phase. It was Steve Jobs being literally fired from his own baby and sent out into the wilderness for 10 years. It's unheard of that a founder then is brought back 10 years later inside their company. And, the rest is history. That company is the largest market cap firm in the world. I see it difficult for that to happen in other cultures because there's not the tolerance for failure that we have in the United States.
Okay, that's a very good point.
But on the second side, often pioneers are the ones that get arrows in their back, as they say. So you guys have there's a very successful German, firm that has been the best copycats in the world. They find, hey, this is working in the United States. Let's figure out how to copy it in Europe. And then they end up selling it to the firm in the United States and making, a gazillion dollars. Find a wave and jump on it.
Yeah. Okay. There is another restriction I see is money, is capital. I think there are many are struggling in the United States. If you have a really good idea, and more important, if you really have a good team, a good story where you could believe in, you will get the money. It's not the problem. In Europe,
Yeah, Konstantin, you're absolutely right about that. Though, interestingly enough, one of our thought leaders is John Mullins at the London Business School. And John's a serial entrepreneur, and he then wrote what I think are some of the best books for us, scale-ups. One is Getting to Plan B. Plan A rarely works, so you got to figure out how to get to Plan B, C, D, or J. And number two, he wrote really the only book that addressed that the best source of capital really is your customer. And that if you want to build a long-term sustainable business, you really want to get it from your customers. And as a result, you can end up maintaining control. So I look at Atlassian, who I've just moved Scott's endorsement to the front of the book. He and Mike have scaled up that company to about 60 billion in market cap. And the two of them still own over 70% of the company. So part of the challenge of being venture-backed is you end up having to give away 90% of the organization. And so I think sometimes the lack of capital is something that can really drive innovation and force you to figure out how to get cash in more interesting ways. Now, with that being said, I'm an investor in B Combinator. It's kind of named after Y Combinator in the United States, out of Barcelona. One of my forum mates, Eric Breva, is the one who's launched it, and they are funding all kinds of innovative companies coming out of their region of Catalonia. So I think it's catching up.
Good to know. Yeah, good to know. Okay. Verne, let's maybe go back to something you said in the beginning. You told me that you are rewriting certain things, certain passages of your books, and you talked about the B hack and that the picture of the climbing the mountain is a little bit more old fashioned now for you. Can you tell us a little bit about the news? What are the new aspects you are focusing on now, right now?
Yeah, the main one is actually how do we structure as we scale? One of the top three barriers, the first is leadership development. It's kind of, the constraints that are between our ears. There really was no parenting manual of how to grow up a business. A lot about startups, a lot about large companies, MBAs, but nothing about. The third is the importance of having effective marketing. And marketing's needed to not just attract customers, but talent and attention and capital to the organization. But number two is making sure that you've got a scalable infrastructure. And here's the fundamental change. Our standard organization chart, now I'm going to get a little technical here, but our standard organization chart was really designed to organize muscle. The might to go to war, to build the great walls of China. But if any of you haven't noticed, we kind of moved from using our backs to our brains. And our organizational structure didn't follow. Form and function have to meet. And so the traditional org chart, head, shoulders, arms, fingers, and toes, it's what it looks like as a human skeletal system, is not useful for scaling in the 21st century. You need what we call an agile scale-up structure, which is really what Bootsart out of the Netherlands has used to scale to 14,000 employees. Spotify in their tribes and squads and their more of their team-based approach. Even higher, the major Chinese white goods manufacturer said, look, we've been spending 50 years trying to fix middle management. You know what we figured out? Nobody wants managed in the 21st century. That's why we have phones, to do that. And so the new approach to scaling is one that really follows a natural model, a model of nature. And if you look at beehives and ant colonies, how much middle management are in those hives? Like none. And so Google and many of the unicorns, reason they've been able to scale so rapidly is they've done it with an entire new approach to organization, how to organize people to get things done. And so we go deep into those 5 principles of teaming and how you use some of the new modern technologies to make that happen inside your organization. So that's new, as well as, hey, let's quit trying to climb the mountain. Instead, let's go with the flow of the marketplace.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Verne, you just before talked about the culture of how we deal with failures.
Yeah.
What would you say? How would you draw the line between failing and success? What's the difference here?
That one you get revenue and the other one you don't. What's interesting is we've got a pretty simple metric, and that is, are people willing to reach into their wallets and give you some money for what it is that you're doing, whether it's invest or buy your products and services. And so that's what's nice is we get some pretty quick feedback from the marketplace.
I like this answer because I think it's very important, just also from my experience with our clients, that we do really important things. We do strategy, we do good execution. Yeah, we talk about the people, A players, and so on. Yeah. But finally, we never should forget that we need to earn money. And that's so important. Yeah. We want to earn really good money because money is kind of power to create good things in the world, to make the change in the world, to have an impact. You need this power, right?
Yeah. Well, and it really is just a indicator that you're delivering value. And if you're willing to deliver a lot of value, then people are willing to pay you and exchange that for a lot of money that represents their effort. So you're exchanging your effort for their effort. And we just needed a way to keep track of that. We created this thing called money. And so I think, again, the market signals to you pretty quick if you've got something they want versus not. And here's the key. Who can pick up those clues sooner than later? And that's why, let me kind of cut to the chase. The number one key to winning any war in any market, you brought up the war we've got going on in Ukraine, is whoever has the best market intel. It's intelligence. Whoever has the best intel and gets it sooner than later is who wins in the marketplace. And so, last year I named the number one business book in the world, Hubert Joly, the French CEO's turnaround of Best Buy. And his book, The Heart of Business. Look, if you can only read one book, throw my book off the boat and get Hubert Joly's The Heart of Business. And one of the key things he emphasizes is that the way you make great strategic decisions is to literally have intel daily, and I want to emphasize that, daily, from your customers and your employees. And in fact, he was so adamant about it that he made sure that all leadership meetings opened, not with how are we doing financially, but what are we hearing from the customers and the employees? So if you want to know a change I made in the new revised edition of Scaling Up, it's going to be out in October, is in our weekly meeting, Konstantin, we open with a round of good news. So that's a way just to check in and count blessings and check in with everyone's mental health, connect. But then we next said, share our results around our priorities and metrics. And then we put customer and employee input. I've moved that up to just behind good news, personally and professionally. So I've moved up physically in the agenda of the leadership team weekly meeting, making sure that you have this intel. And the only way you're going to have something to discuss is if you're gathering that intel from the marketplace. By the way, to give an example, everybody's amazed at how well the Apple stores do around the globe. Well, part of it is something that Steve Jobs put in from the very beginning. He was a big fan of the Net Promoter Score. And the store leader, they don't call him a store manager, they call him the store leader. Every day, their first responsibility is to call all of the customers who said, hey, I didn't give you a 9 or 10 on a scale of 0 to 10, my enthusiasm for my experience at the Apple store. Yes, I would like to share that. And they are expected to be called within 24 hours. And so that store is getting a constant input of intel from customers and the employees. And so if you can be 1% better every week, compound interest is your friend.
Oh, it's very interesting. There is in Germany a chain for like a drugstore chain, a DM. Have you heard about DM?
I haven't.
It's very, very successful. It has a lot of places, and they made this very interesting thing. They turned the pyramid of the hierarchy. You just talked about this here, like a human skeleton, upside down. So for them, the person, the cashier on the cashier desk, is the boss of the company. And they mean it real, so they can really do decisions, local decisions. They can decide everything. They can decide what they buy, what they sell. I mean, within the cosmos of their products. And the advantage is that they are very close to the clients like that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Precisely.
Yeah. Verne, talking about strategy, I'm sometimes as a coach thinking, what is the right team to really do the core of the strategy in a company? Is it really a very small team with the best heads, or do you need a larger team, or how would you advise us to work here?
Yeah. Well, Konstantin, it's a great question. And we take the term strategic planning that everybody just kind of throws around, and we say it really is two different processes requiring two different teams. There's the strategic thinking piece of setting strategy, and then there's the execution planning. So you've got to set strategy and then execute on it. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to setting strategy, it's a very small team. And Michael Porter, kind of the father of strategy at Harvard, he said it as long as Hubert Joly, strategy is ultimately decided by one person, and that is the CEO or the managing director, whatever that title is. It's, strategy that's decided by a committee ends up being a mess. Now, you don't want the CEO to be doing that in isolation. You want them immersed in intel from the marketplace and the employees and a few select people that they trust in terms of their ability to challenge them in their thinking. And that's why we think the most important routine. And Jim Collins, when I cornered him after studying greatness for 25 years, I said, Jim, what is the single most important thing us mere mortal companies should learn from your 25 years? And he really didn't hesitate, Konstantin. He said to set up what is called the council. And for me, it's every Monday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's only me and the 3 CEOs of the 3 companies that that run our universe. And as the name implies, it's to counsel me. It's not a collaboration. It's not a compromise, but it's to give me feedback on critical strategic decisions that I need to make. It is not your whole executive team. That's why you have a separate meeting, which I do at 10:30 with that team when we get down to the operational issues on a weekly basis. So it's a small team of people that can think strategically with you. It's a place for you to kind of talk out things. And here's the key. You can't work on strategy once a quarter or once a year. You've got to be working on it every single week. So let me go back and relay that to Steve Jobs. So Steve had lunch every day with Jonathan Ive and the design team. He knew that design was the key to Apple's success. And that's what CEOs do. You got to put your time where your key capabilities are. No different than John D. Rockefeller having lunch every day with his 9 directors. And then everybody thought Steve would sit around like in lotus position humming. And all of a sudden, these brilliant ideas would strike him. No, if you read the biography, the definitive biography on what his day and his week looked like, he spent, Konstantin, most afternoons grabbing a hold of a customer issue. He wasn't into focus groups because customers will say something different than actually their behavior. But he'd grab a hold of issues that he'd hear customers were having with his beautiful technology and devices. And he would literally trace the root of that problem through the organization to learn at the chagrin of everybody else in the organization. This was a guy that was deeply immersed in his customers' response and feedback to his beautiful technologies and devices. So Intel daily, and then get in a room once a week and talk about it and see what you can come up with. And all you have to do is make 1 or 2 great decisions every year. But again, overnight successes take a hell of a long time, again, as Steve Jobs said.
Sorry. Steve, I call you Steve now. Verne, Verne, let's go to execution. We are teaching our clients to use OKRs, objective and key results. And I often experience that they tend to get lost into too much details or to try to put it too logical, everything, and everything has to fit. And then they finally get lost within the logic of the whole thing. What is our key advice to them?
That you've got to be careful on the time frames, Konstantin. Because everything's so chaotic and moving so quickly, that's why you really need to think about it as we're here running a marathon. Let's call that the quarter, 13 weeks.
Yeah.
And then within that, we have a set of sprints. And generally, technically, a sprint is 2 weeks, but for Google, it's 5 days. And for me, the only thing that you need to be clear on is what do we need to do this week? And what part of that do we need to do today? So you need to be very precise and concrete on today's activity and what we need to accomplish this week out of a massive project that could take us 6 months. And then based on the intel, you need to adjust. You need to adapt. Remember, the survival is those who are the most adaptable, not the ones who are most fit. And so rapid intel, being able then to adjust your strategies very quickly based on what you're hearing in the marketplace, then set what it is we're going to do this week and then reevaluate. So I think where we get in trouble is when we try to lay out these elaborate 36-month plans when all of a sudden the world shuts down because of a pandemic and it's thrown out the window anyway. And I think we go back to that idea that we way underestimate what we can accomplish in a year. And we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and way underestimate what we can accomplish in 10 years. So it's important for you to be very ambitious with your 10-year goal. Keep your eye on the prize and then rapidly adjust every week based on what you learn. And again, back to our analogy of nature, if you look at the path of a river, there are no straight lines. It is all over the place, but it's constantly finding the path of least resistance at every moment of its movement, instead of trying to bore through, messes that people that are pig-headed can cause organizations to beat their head against the wall that they shouldn't have to do. So 10-year and the next, I'm going to say 2 weeks are about the most visibility that you can have.
It's interesting because I think it's a very typical German way of doing things. Is very straight, very structured thing. And there was some 10 or 15 years ago, there was a big accident of our fast, we have these fast trains, ICE, very, very high speed trains going 300 kilometers per an hour and faster. And it was a huge accident with hundreds of deaths, really bad one. And then they had the discussion about the different philosophy of German engineering and French engineering. And it was so interesting because the German engineering is very, very strict, very precise. But if there is a mistake coming up, it's really bad because there's no elasticity anymore in the whole system. While the French fast train has a totally different philosophy. It's much softer, everything. It was very interesting, this discussion. Yeah. Okay. So go with the flow. Go with the flowing like the water. I like that picture a lot.
And by the way, if you want to use a German example, that's why I love the Autobahn. As you know, they made it curvy on purpose. It's not a straight line. Otherwise, people would get bored out of their mind and fall asleep. By keeping it gently curving, it's part of what's critical with the design.
Okay, so we have also a little bit of the other part, of the flowing part, and it's also interesting. The curves always have a certain angle, so you absolutely can trust that you can go every curve with 250 or 300 kilometers. It's no problem. If it wouldn't be like that, there will be warning signs. That's also interesting.
You got it.
Okay, Verne. Verne, you know that I'm a philosopher from my, let's say, basic training, and so I always like to have some small, little more philosophical type of questions. And so maybe I may ask you something like, Verne, what would you like to know?
You know what I would love to know? I'm a physics junkie, and it blows my mind that we still don't understand gravity and magnetism. Think about that. It's the 21st century. We understand the formulas that allow us to utilize those two, but we don't understand how they work at all. And the fact that we're still fighting gravity blows my mind. I really thought we were going to be able to have levitating cars to solve all of this traffic issue and transportation issue. And we are still stuck with 4 tires on the road with a steering wheel. It blows my mind.
Okay, Verne, beautiful story, and I think it fits a lot also in our philosophy at Scaling Up. So we have, for example, if I look at your book, Scale Up Compensation, you have one chapter where what it's about, not incentivize only single persons, but just try to get the whole team running. We have Jim Collins with the level 5 leader kind of person, and I like a lot this picture of the mirror and the window. It's a beautiful picture. So this level 5 leader is looking into the mirror if he looks at mistakes, but he looks out of the window if he looks at successes. So he sees that there is much more than himself that's supporting the success, all the people who helping him and so on. So this is a very nice picture also. And Verne, I would say maybe do you have at the end of our podcast, one is maybe you have what is the top book you recommended already? Some books. Do you have any other recommendations on books or podcasts or things we should listen to?
Just a few. Well, first of all, I hope everybody will be interested enough to sign up for my weekly insights. They come out every Thursday. I try to curate what I think are the best articles and books and podcasts that business leaders ought to take, spend a few minutes every weekend reading and taking a listen to. But a few weeks ago, I pointed to what I thought was the best business podcast I had heard this century. And that was the great strategist Gary Hamel out of Chicago's interview of Jim Clifton, the CEO of Gallup. And, Gallup has been interviewing 100 million employees every year for decades, trying to understand what drives employee engagement. And that's what you're trying to do, is just have more energy coming from your team than your competitors. Time's limited, but energy's not. You're really chief energy officers. And there were two key conclusions that came out of that. And he said, hey, I hate to be so simplistic about it, but first, guess what? Nobody wants managed. They don't want that administrative manager type that we had last century. Something I spoke to earlier in this new organization chart that we're creating. But what they do want, and that's backed up by Google's research and Project Oxygen, is they do want to coach. They want us to be coaches, like professional sports teams. Tom Brady doesn't want managed, but he does appreciate some great coaches. So then it comes number 2, what does it mean to be a great coach? And he said, again, I hate to be too simplistic, but it really boils down to one question that you ask every employee every week. And that is, what's your goal this week? Not this year, this week. And what are any barriers in the way of you achieving that? Now you just created multiple coaching moments. Are they working on the right thing? Is it important versus urgent? What are the things that are in the way of them achieving it? Now, here's where I come back full circle, Konstantin. At the heart of our work is the daily huddle. And by the way, the agenda of the daily huddle really causes you to ask every employee every day, what's up? What's your number one thing you're working on? And number 2, your metrics. Number 3, and what's your constraint? What's your barrier? What's in the way? And so we are asking what Jim Clifton discovered through decades of asking hundreds of millions of employees every year. We're causing that to happen every day. And that's why the tools work. So listen to that podcast, Gary Hamel interviewing Jim Clifton. And then number 2, it comes to what I've consistently said is the number 1 business book ever written. And that is the late Eli Goldrat's book, The Goal, which is ultimately what nature understands. When you see a constraint, that's what you focus on, and you find a way around it. And so for you to understand the constraint between your ears, the constraint in your business model, and ultimately, if you can understand the constraint in an industry and you can get control of it, you can fix it, then guess what? You dominate. And that's why the theory of constraints is the most powerful idea in really life.
Fantastic closing here, Verne. I could go on hours talking with you, but our time is over now. And so thank you so much for taking your time. It was a great honor to having you here. And we will have you back in our Scale Up in Germany and Europe, I'm sure. And I wish you a very good time and very successful time for you.
Well, and Konstantin, thank you. I think only somebody with your deep philosophical training and background could ask some of the most interesting questions. They've been spectacular. And as you know, it takes, hats off to you. It takes true depth and intelligence to ask a great question. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Verne. Bye-bye.